Hello, I'm Jamie Guidell, and I'm going to talk to you about altered intervals. There are some preliminary concepts that you need to know, which are covered in other videos, and I will review them here briefly. The musical alphabet. The musical alphabet has 7 letters, A through G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so forth. Learn to recognize them individually. If you see 2 black keys, the C is to the left. Play all the C's. The D is in between the 2 black keys. Play all the D's. And the E is to the right of the 2 black keys. Play all the E's. You can learn to recognize the letters of the musical alphabet based on where they are in relationship to the 2 or the 3 black keys. Half and whole steps. A half step is from one key, any key, to the very, very next key without skipping any keys. It could be from a white key to a black key, or it could be from a black key to a white key, or it could be from a white key to another white key, if you're not skipping any keys in between. A whole step has one key in between skipped. From here to here is a whole step. You're skipping this black key. From here to here is a whole step. You're skipping this white key. From here to here is a whole step. You're skipping this white key. From here to here is a whole step. You're skipping this white key. A whole step can be from a white key to a white key, a black key to a black key, a white key to a black key, or a black key to a white key. Sharps and flats. When you take one letter of the musical alphabet, let's say for example C, and if you raise it up a half step, that note is C sharp. That's C sharp. If you play D and you go up to this key, that's D sharp. If you play F here, this is F sharp. This is G, G sharp, A, and A sharp. White keys can also be sharp. This is E, and this white key is E sharp. It's also called F. It has 2 names. This is B. This is B sharp, also called C. 2 names. We went up for the sharps. If you go down a half step from a letter, that's the flat. This is B, this is B flat. A flat, G, G flat. F, this is F flat, a white key flat. Practice the sharps and flats individually. For example, play C, C sharp, all of them. C, C sharp, C, C sharp, F, F sharp, F, F sharp, and so forth. Also for the flats, B, B flat, B, B flat, B, B flat, D, D flat, for example, D, D flat, D, D flat. You can also do an exercise playing from A to A with sharps, going up, and then A to A going down with flats. A sharp, B, B sharp, also called C, Notice that we're using all 7 letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C. That's why we have to say A sharp, B, B sharp, and then repeat that note and call it C, because there is no black key here. That's why you end up repeating that one. B, B sharp, also called C. C sharp, D, D sharp, E, E sharp, also called F, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and A. Going down, you can say the flats. A flat, G, G flat, F, F flat, also called E, E flat, D, D flat, C, C flat, also called B, B flat, A flat, or just, you can end here. Notice that the keys have 2 names. This key is A sharp or B flat. This key is called C sharp. It's also called D flat. C sharp or D flat. The white keys have 2 names also. This is called B sharp because here's B, there's B sharp. It's also called C. B can also be called C flat. Major scales. The major scales can be learned from the circle of fifths. The scale of C is a succession of notes from C to C with no sharps or flats. Started on C. I played 8 notes, ending on the C an octave higher. G has 1 sharp, F sharp. The scale of D has 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. When you learn all your major scales, you will have a good background for learning the intervals that are based on scales, which is in the video Intervals Part 1. Once you see that video and understand basic intervals, like a unison, a second, 1, 2, 2 notes next to each other, a third, 1, 2, 3, these are thirds. You skip a key in between. A fourth is from 1 note to 4 notes higher, counting the first and last note. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a fourth. Here's a fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's a sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can start anywhere, and these are basic intervals on the white keys. This is also a fourth, even though it sounds different than this fourth. It has a harsher quality. A fourth consists of 4 notes. A fifth of 5 notes. A seventh of 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1 to 7 is the seventh. 8 notes apart are called an octave. From 1 note to the same note, 8 notes higher, is an octave. From D to D, or F to F. Now that you understand basic intervals, the other concept is diatonic intervals when you are using the major scale. Diatonic intervals are scale intervals. For example, the D scale with 2 sharps is D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. You can build a third upon the keynote D. 1, 2, 3. That's a third. This is also a third on the white keys, 1, 2, 3. But that's not a diatonic interval. It's not a scale interval because F is not in that scale of D. This is just a basic interval, a basic third. This is called a major third because it's within the scale. So in the scale of any major scale, the seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths are called major. The unison, the fourth, the fifth, and the octave are called perfect. Perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect octave. Now we can alter those diatonic intervals. So we come to the topic of this video, which is altered intervals. Here are the rules. A major interval contracted, made smaller by a half step, becomes minor. Let's do this in C major to make it easy. Here's a major third in the scale of C, which is white keys, no sharps or flats. If we take the top note and we lower it by a half step, it becomes a minor third. So a major third becomes a minor third if you contract it. If you make the distance between the two notes a half step smaller, the major interval becomes minor. A major second, contracted by a half step, becomes a minor second. A major sixth, contracted by a half step, I'm bringing the top note a half step down, becomes a minor sixth. A major seventh, contracted by a half step, becomes a minor seventh. A major interval contracted by a half step becomes minor. You can also contract an interval by moving the bottom note up instead of the top note down. So here's a major third. If I raise the bottom note by a half step, I'm contracting the interval of this major third by a half step. This is a minor third. Here's a major sixth. I can turn it into a minor sixth, either this way, or this major sixth can become a minor sixth this way. Most of the time, the easiest way is to take the top note, bring it down a half step if you're familiar with the scale, and use the bottom note as the key note of the scale. A minor interval contracted by a half step is called diminished. A major third contracted by a half step becomes minor. That minor third contracted by a half step becomes diminished. Now I know that this looks like a major second, but it all depends on how you spell it. From C to E is a major third. If you use those letters consistently, it will always be a third. From C to E is always some type of third because you're skipping a letter in the alphabet, which is D. So a minor third is C to E flat, and a diminished third is C to E double flat. If you were to spell this C-D, that's a major second. If you spell it C-E double flat, that's a diminished third. Let's take another minor interval as an example. A major sixth, C to A, becomes minor if it's C to A flat. And it becomes a diminished sixth if it's C to A double flat. It sounds like a perfect fifth, and it is if you call it C to G. But if you call it C to A double flat, it's a diminished sixth. Let's take one more example. From C to B is a major seventh. C to B flat is a minor seventh. C to B double flat is a diminished seventh. Perfect intervals contracted by a half step are called diminished. C to G is a perfect fifth. C to G flat is a diminished fifth. Let's look at other perfect intervals contracted by a half step that become diminished. Here's a perfect fourth. C to F. If I lower the F a half step and call this F flat, that's a diminished fourth. If I call it C to E, see, this has two names, F flat or E. If I call it C to E, it's a major third. From C to C is a perfect octave. From C to C flat is a diminished octave. A diminished interval contracted by a half step is called doubly diminished. So C to G is a perfect fifth. C to G flat is a diminished fifth. C to G double flat is a doubly diminished fifth. When going over your sharps and flats, it will be useful to include double sharps and double flats. So this is C sharp, because here's C, that's C sharp. This can be called C double sharp, it's D, or C double sharp. This note can also be called E double flat. So double sharps and double flats are involved with the altered intervals. But I would suggest to learn the major turning to minor, the minor turning to diminished, and the perfect turning to diminished. Learn those first before you learn the doubly diminished. The same thing for the augmented intervals. All the scale intervals, the major ones and the perfect ones that are based upon the major scale, if you expand them by a half step, they're called augmented. So this is a major second, C to D, and an augmented second is C to D sharp. We don't call this E flat if it's an augmented second. C to E flat would be a minor third because here's E, C to E is a major third, C to E flat is a minor third. But if we call this interval an augmented second, then we have to call it C to D sharp. All the scale intervals, whether major or perfect, if you expand them, make them larger by a half step, by raising the top note, or by lowering the bottom note, they're called augmented. Here's a major sixth in the key of C, from C to A. Here's an augmented sixth, C to A sharp. Here is a major seventh, C to B. Here's an augmented seventh, C to B sharp. We can call this perfect octave if we call it C to C, but it's called an augmented seventh if we name it as C to B sharp, because C to B is 7 letters in the musical alphabet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So if we use the letter B, that's a seventh from C to B. An augmented interval expanded by a half step is called doubly augmented. So here is a perfect fifth. C to G. augmented fifth, C to G sharp. Doubly augmented fifth, C to G double sharp. Let's take an augmented sixth. C to A is a major sixth. C to A sharp is an augmented sixth. C to A double sharp is a doubly augmented sixth. It all depends on which letters you are using to spell the notes, and many of them will be enharmonic, which means many of the intervals will have two names, two different spellings. Let's review the rules one more time. Making intervals smaller by a half step. Major becomes minor, minor becomes diminished, perfect becomes diminished, diminished becomes doubly diminished. Expanding intervals. The major and perfect intervals expanded become augmented. The augmented intervals expanded become doubly augmented.